On September 7th, 2010, a minor fishing dispute revealed a weapon more powerful than missiles. After the Japanese Coast Guard detained a Chinese fishing captain near the disputed Senkaku Islands, Beijing didn't escalate militarily. It restricted exports of critical minerals vital to Japanese industries. Within weeks, prices surged, factories panicked, and the world discovered an uncomfortable truth. China controlled a critical supply chain it could weaponize at will. But how did China end up with a rare earth monopoly in the first place? And can the United States realistically break it? The story is actually pretty interesting, and it begins during the early Cold War. By the 1950s, engineers in both the United States and the Soviet Union realized that rare earth minerals were critical for pushing beyond the technological limits of post-World War II aviation, electronics, and advanced weapon systems. With the discovery of rich deposits at Mountain Pass, California, the United States quickly became the world's leading producer of rare earth elements. For decades, America dominated global supply, well into the late 1980s. But the traditional method of rare earth mining came with its hidden cost. It was expensive, environmentally hazardous, and increasingly controversial. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, environmental concerns were reshaping U.S. policy and public opinion. Figures like Edward Nixon, a trained geologist and environmental consultant, reflected this broader shift in thinking, which eventually led to stricter environmental oversight, including the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency and major amendments to the Clean Air Act under President Richard Nixon. As regulations tightened and production costs rose, many U.S. companies chose to shut down or move rare earth operations rather than invest in cleaner but far more expensive processing technologies. China saw an opportunity and moved quickly to fill the void. Beginning in the 1980s, Beijing invested heavily in rare earth research, mining, and processing, establishing the world's largest rare earth research facilities, backed by state support, cheap labor, and a willingness to absorb environmental costs Western countries increasingly avoided. By the 1990s, China wasn't just extracting rare earths, it was building the entire supply chain, from mining and refining to manufacturing. That strategy was summed up by China's former leader, Deng Xiaoping, during his famous Southern Tour, when he remarked, "The Middle East has oil, China has rare earths." It was a clear signal of how Beijing viewed these minerals, not just as resources, but as strategic leverage. The final blow came in 1998, when the United States sold off its remaining rare earth stockpiles. That same year, the last major U.S. rare earth processing facility shut down, effectively handing China control of a resource the world would soon realize it couldn't live without. So, why are rare earth minerals suddenly back in the global spotlight? The answer lies in the escalating economic and technological rivalry between Washington and Beijing. As the United States imposed new tariffs and technology restrictions on China, Beijing chose to respond, not with missiles or military threats, but with resources. On April 4th, 2025, China added 7 rare earth elements and permanent magnets to its export control list. Any company looking to ship these materials overseas would now require special approval from the Chinese government. The message was unmistakable. These materials sit at the heart of modern supply chains, from electric vehicles and consumer electronics to precision-guided weapons and advanced fighter jets. Rare earth magnets in particular are essential for everything from radar systems to missile guidance and aircraft engines. As export controls tightened, factories in the United States and Europe flagged supply concerns. Even Ford's plant in Chicago faced slowdowns. F-35 engine deliveries were delayed, and the European Union's trade commissioner met China's commerce minister over mounting supply chain risks. What started as a trade and tariff dispute had clearly evolved into something far more serious, a strategic power play over who controls the building blocks of modern industry and modern warfare. That brings us to the most important question. Can the United States realistically break China's dominance over rare earth minerals? The Trump administration has already begun to act. In March, an executive order invoked emergency powers to accelerate domestic production of critical minerals. The U.S. Department of Defense has also invested roughly $400 million into MP Materials, the company operating the only active rare earth mine in the United States, while Washington has pursued partnerships with allies including Japan, Australia, South Korea, Ukraine, and several ASEAN nations to diversify supply. But despite these moves, two major challenges remain. The first is not mining, it's processing. China produces around 70% of the world's rare earths, but it processes more than 90% of global supply. Most countries can increase extraction, but they lack the infrastructure to refine and process these minerals at scale. In fact, without new processing capacity, rare earths mined outside China often end up being shipped back to China for refinement, reinforcing the very dependency the West is trying to escape. China has spent decades mastering the entire supply chain, from extraction to advanced processing. Catching up will take years, not months. The second challenge is even harder to fix. Expertise. Yes, knowledge is the real shortage. The rare earth problem isn't just about digging mines or building refineries. It's about knowledge. China didn't dominate this sector by accident. It invested consistently for decades in people, institutions, and technical know-how. Breaking China's monopoly will require more than executive orders. It will demand long-term investment in education and workforce development, training geologists, chemists, metallurgists, engineers, and machinists across the entire value chain. Universities will need to modernize curricula. National laboratories must accelerate applied research. And industry must build talent pipelines instead of relying on a shrinking pool of specialists. The United States once dominated the rare earth landscape. It can do so again, but only if it stops thinking like a miner and starts thinking like a systems engineer. So the real question is this: can the United States realistically break China's dominance, or has Beijing already locked in a long-term advantage? What do you guys think? If you found this explanation useful, you're welcome to like and subscribe. I'll be covering more straightforward explainers on geopolitics, history, and economics. Thanks for watching.